Good afternoon and welcome to Washington Week's digital show, Washington Week Recommends. I'm Yamiche Alcindor, and each week I recommend great reporting that I think deserves your attention. And today I want to highlight a revealing and thorough piece about Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' controversial efforts to overhaul Florida's election system ahead of his possible run for president. And Fabiola Cineas, a reporter at Fox News, explains all of this and more in her article. It's titled, quote, Ron DeSantis' War on Woke in Florida Schools Explained. And Fabiola joins me now. So Fabiola, thanks so much for being here and welcome to Washington Week Recommends. So you break this down so well. You have all these different titles of the ways that he's going after K through 12 and transgender rights. Just break down a bit of the overall thesis of your article and what's driving this.
Yamiche, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be here. And I just want to say it's been an eventful Black History Month to start us off in 2023. But what's driving this is that we're in a time in America where we're facing a conservative backlash. Beginning in 2020, we saw conservatives, actually starting with Donald Trump, just unleash a number of laws that ban the teaching of divisive concepts. And so those concepts are related to race, they're related to sex, they're related to gender and sexual orientation. And so Donald Trump started off by saying, we can't have any kind of diversity, equity, inclusion programs in the federal government. And so that kind of trickled down to states where Republican governors started saying, you know what, let's do this in schools as well. And so in states like Florida, states like Indiana, we see laws where teachers are banned from talking about divisive concepts that people think can make young white children uncomfortable about their race or boys uncomfortable about their gender. And so we're really seeing gag orders in schools. And so that's the context of all of this. And then this year, what we started seeing was just a doubling down on this in Florida, especially. And so the College Board released its official framework for its new AP AfricanAmerican Studies course. And we all thought that that was something to be celebrated. But then when it released the framework, there was just a lot of controversy. And so it was controversial because when people started looking through the framework, they noticed that a number of controversial hot button issues were actually removed from the framework. And so that was concerning because they were the very concepts and topics that Ron DeSantis in Florida and his education administration had railed against for some time now.
And so many people might be familiar with book banning or the AP African-American Studies course because it's been happening at least for a couple of weeks now. But what your article does, which is why I wanted to have you on, was it really breaks down that this is much bigger than just an AP course. There's all these different ways that Ron DeSantis is really influencing education in Florida. And I should say for folks out there, I'm a Florida native, so I'm very interested in what's going on in Florida and education there. So first you talk about K through 12 public schools and book banning. Talk a bit about how he's trying to put his hand in things there when you talk about K through 12.
Absolutely. So with K through 12, we see Ron DeSantis kind of going hard. His administration is just doubling down again on the book ban. So it was actually in 2021 that Ron DeSantis first introduced legislation to say like these divisive concepts can't be taught in classrooms. And then this year, we see his education administration actually following through on these measures. So when it comes to book banning, basically a number of different districts are telling teachers that they can't select the books for their school library. So they have to wait for a librarian, someone who's considered a media specialist in Florida, to actually go through and approve the books that can be contained in their library. And so we're seeing a bunch of photos spreading on Twitter of libraries that have been covered up with paper, they're taped up, books removed. And so it's a lengthy process for teachers and librarians to kind of go through and figure out whether these books can be approved or not and whether they're appropriate for students. And also students can't even bring like e-readers to class in certain districts because whatever they're reading hasn't been approved. And it's a little scary because some of the books that we're seeing that have been removed, for example, like a book about Roberto Clemente was removed, and DeSantis responded to this yesterday and saying, oh, that was a joke, like the district is just taking it too far. But it's concerning because it's just unclear what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And teachers can actually face consequences and even jail time for this.
And you talk about the idea as you talk about teachers. One of the other headlines that you have in your article is he's dismantling tenure and tamping down on hiring. So talk a bit about how he's even influencing the people that are going into the classrooms.
Exactly. So on the higher education front, tenure is another part of what Ron DeSantis is going after. I've talked to a number of experts and scholars who basically say they're not sure how successful he's going to be at this, but Ron DeSantis is saying, you know what? I think that a lot of professors are dead weight. They get tenure, they stop publishing, they stop producing, they're, taking up a lot of the state's funding and money. And so he's just like, we should develop a new system or shake up the system that's been in place for a long time and basically say that tenured professors should undergo review more often, so about every 5 years, and also that they should be able to be fired without cause, despite the fact that they have tenure. And that goes against what tenure fundamentally is.
Yeah, and we had this country had such a robust conversation about tenure when my friend Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of the 1619 Project, when she was denied tenure and ultimately ended up going to Howard University to start a journalism and democracy center because of what happened in North Carolina. But I digress. I want to talk to you a bit about eliminating DEI initiatives. What's the impact there? You touched on it in your first answer, but talk a bit more about what Ron DeSantis is doing, especially as it comes to Florida.
Absolutely. So beginning in January, a lot of professors just started getting online and speaking out and saying, I was just told that my email was getting searched. And the reason why it was being searched by administrators was because this professor was involved with coordinating DE&I programs. And apparently, a lot of those programs were canceled because of this order from Ron DeSantis this year. And so that was concerning because it's a space where a lot of teachers get together and just talk about initiatives, ways to make campus more inclusive for professors, for students. And so teachers with very little notice were told that these programs were not going to move forward. And I think relatedly, a number of university professors from, I want to say about 20 Florida State universities came together and signed a letter saying that they were going to really crack down on this and prevent teachers from continuing with these programs and making sure that D&I was not a part of curriculum or not a part of core classes that teachers were teaching students in Florida universities.
Yeah. You also make the really important point that this isn't also only about race. There's also that he's targeting, as you write, targeting trans healthcare, that the governor has instructed state universities to report on whether they're using public funding for gender affirming healthcare. So talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, so this was very, very alarming for a lot of people who have been following Ron DeSantis's efforts against trans people. And so in January, one of his staff members basically sent a letter to 12 university presidents in Florida saying, we need you to report on how many trans people have been receiving healthcare in your clinics. So they wanted specific details about the kinds of procedures they were receiving, whether it was a surgical procedure, the kinds of medicine they were receiving, how many of them were diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And so that was just very scary, right? Because it's not clear yet what they're going to do with the evidence. But we know from what Ron DeSantis has done before that this is probably not going to be something that's in favor of trans rights and trans healthcare. Because, right, he's launched efforts and has tried to block, for example, Medicaid coverage for people seeking various surgeries.
Connected to that is this idea that there was so much pushback because Florida schools were trying to track menstrual cycles of teen girls. Now, my understanding is that effort has sort of been abandoned, but what's your sense of sort of how that fits into what we've been talking about?
Right. So a lot of people have been trying to say that that's not a Ron DeSantis initiative. It doesn't make sense. It's not connected to Ron DeSantis, right? Because it was the organization that was leading athletics for the state. So it's not connected to DeSantis, but a lot of people quickly drew a line between that and what Ron DeSantis has been doing. And so what this organization was suggesting was that in the routine questionnaire about just menstrual cycles, it's usually optional, that question of just how often do you get your menstrual cycle? But now they're saying this should be mandatory. And so even though that didn't go through, there's a chance that could be presented again and adopted in the future. And that would just be another way that trans students are coming under attack for their participation in athletics.
Such an important point to make there. You also write about reigning in a school that was considered progressive, New College of Florida. This is fascinating to me because it's a small college, but the governor is apparently getting quite involved here. Explain what's going on.
Yeah, so the New College of Florida, maybe they saw this coming, maybe they didn't, but it is happening. And Ron DeSantis has initiated what a lot of people are calling a hostile takeover, a conservative takeover of the campus. And what's especially concerning about this one is that New College it's a very small school, about 650 to 700 students. It was established in the late 60s, and over time, it's become a place, a safe haven for LGBTQ students. It's considered progressive for how academics are carried out on campus. Students aren't graded in the same way that they're graded at other institutions. And so this really is a haven for students who want to think progressively and kind of enter fields that, you know, maybe aren't related to STEM or aren't these what's traditionally considered core subjects. And so what Ron DeSantis has done is one of the first moves he did this year was step in and shake up the school's board. It's only 13 people. And he went in and appointed 6 new board members to the board. And so one of those board members is Christopher Rufo. And Rufo has gotten fame in the past 2 to 3 years because he's the guy who's behind the hysteria around critical race theory. And so critical race theory, right, is the academic concept that says that racism is endemic in the United States. But Rufo has kind of taken this and turned this into a war on wokeness, right? So anywhere where critical race theory might be taught, Christopher Rufo is saying this needs to stop. And so he's been credited with being the person who Donald Trump, you know, modeled his executive order from 2020 after. And so the fact that Christopher Rufo is now on the board of the school is very concerning to students. And so Christopher Rufo was there at the first board meeting of the year. Students were there protesting on campus because they were very concerned about what this new board would do. A lot of the people who DeSantis appointed are conservatives, are people who are his allies. And so one of the first things that they did as a new board was fire the school's president, who students loved, right? This was a woman who was celebrated. And so on her way out, she said that unfortunately, New College is just a lab right now for Ron DeSantis to test out his conservative ideas, to really try to make his vision for education play out. Because right, a lot of people have speculated that Ron DeSantis will maybe any day now announce that he's running for president of the United States. And so this is his chance to kind of show the rest of the country, to show conservatives across the country what he's capable of. And unfortunately, students at New College are the guinea pigs or collateral damage in those efforts.
I mean, it's just fascinating to think what he's doing at that school. I want to go back to the AfricanAmerican Studies, AP AfricanAmerican Studies course, because hundreds of people rallied this week against this. They rallied against Ron DeSantis' rejection of the AP course. I wonder how effective is the pushback against what Ron DeSantis is trying to do in that case, but also if you could even broaden it overall, like, is there an effective machine to push back against some of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of people, like you said, have taken to the streets. They're online and just protesting what Ron DeSantis did. And so what happened was that last month, Ron DeSantis said that the new AP African American Studies course that's being piloted in 60 schools across America is not something that Florida would accept in its current state. He rejected the course and said that it has no significant educational value whatsoever because it contained concepts like intersectionality or wanted students to explore incarceration or reparations or systemic racism. And he said that this was indoctrination and wokeness that is masquerading as education. And so a lot of people are saying we're not sure how much Ron DeSantis, right? Because he's gone farther to say we're actually maybe going to do away with AP across the state in general. And so that's caused another level of uproar. And so it's not clear how much Ron DeSantis will actually be able to do when it comes to removing AP courses from high schools. But something the state can actually do is stop paying for AP courses, which cost around like $97 a test. So that might be a challenge. But in terms of the rollback of the course, it does, in fact, violate the law that Ron DeSantis passed last year. And so that is something that Ron DeSantis can do, say this course actually violates this divisive concepts law. And so this is something that can't happen in Florida. And so it's still left to be seen what the College Board is going to do to continue to fight back. They did issue a new statement this week saying we should have been better from the beginning with denouncing Ron DeSantis, pointing out that his book banning and censorship is a form of authoritarianism. And so this is a fight that's only just starting. And so we're going to see where Ron DeSantis goes next and how the College Board pivots to basically say that we're going to continue to fight Ron DeSantis. But I will also say that while there has been pushback to DeSantis is still saying they're going to reject the course. I just learned this morning that 600 high schools are getting ready to actually adopt the pilot course. So originally they were anticipating that it would be 200 schools that would take the course in this coming fall 2023, but now it's up to 600. So while DeSantis is pushing back, other conservative states are pushing back. We're seeing blue states really adopt and support this course.
Well, such fascinating and revealing reporting. Thank you so much, Fabiola, for all of your work and for sharing your reporting.
Thank you so much for having me, Yamiche.
And thanks, of course, all of you for watching Washington Week Recommends. You can find us here every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And tonight, be sure to tune in to Washington Week on PBS. We'll discuss the busy week of news for President Biden and former President Donald Trump. Hope to see you there.